Hi everybody, Armoured Pants here, and I have my long awaited STG Guard Premium Tank Review, a complete guide as always. Now, you've maybe seen some reviews for this tank before, but you haven't seen one like this, because this one includes gameplay which is in the Hall of Fame, second in terms of damage in the North American server. It's a monster game, and you're going to want to stay tuned and check this gameplay out. Now we're going to have a look at tech spec. We're going to use blitzhanger.com for that as always. The history of this tank, was it a real tank? Well, kind of. It didn't exist, but it was actually a real tank design. In 1949, Soviet tanking school designed this tank, and it was a different concept because it had the fighting compartment at the back and the engine in the front. But because of that, it would have had additional costs, it required additional spare parts, maintenance and training, so they decided to discontinue it. But let's have a look at the tech spec as it stands now in Blitz. So in terms of provisions, I would run milk improved fuel and extra combat rations. You're going to want to do that to max out the rate of fire, view range, etc., which is always important. I would run gun rammer, supercharger and vertical stabilizer because it's a medium tank, although refined gun may want to be used, and we'll discuss why in a second. Because the 122mm gun, as you would expect, has poor gun handling for a Soviet tank. Reload is 12.6 seconds, or 13.6 if you run calibrated shells. Pen is 180mm, 225mm and 61mm on your AP, Pramo and HE. If you use calibrated shells, it goes up to 189, 236 and 67. So that's why you may want to run it particularly for that HE pen. Damage is 400, 236 on your Pramo, and it is 500 on your HE rounds. Now, muzzle velocity is 1144 meters per second for AP and HE, going up to 1300 meters per second for APCR, which is your Pramo round. Now, the gun index is 9.4, which is okay. But if you run vertical stabilizer, it's 6.62. So if you think you're going to be firing shots from distance, not circling a death, etc., then perhaps running a refined gun is a better option to get that better gun handling, right? You get a 50% lift actually on your gun handling if you use refined gun. So think about that, guys. Depends on your gameplay. Mobility index though is 11, which is superb. It is, you know, that's a 3 and almost 4 times better than many tier 8 medium tanks. So it really is a mobile and agile tank. And you will see that when we look at the gameplay too. This tank can get around the map. Concealment numbers, well, if you take an RU-251, which has a view range of 304, which is one of the best of tier 8, your view range is, you're going to get spotted up if you're still at 220 meters, and if you move at 240 meters, and your own view range is 290. So it's not bad, it's not great. It's adequate, so that's going to allow you to do your job at spotting and scouting. If there is an RU on the other team, or something with a superior view range like the German Bulldog, just be aware you may get spotted up a bit earlier. And that, of course, is very important if there are no light tanks on your team and you have to fulfill the role of the scout and do the spotting job. So just be aware of that, be a bit more cautious. Now, when we take a look at the armor profile here, the first thing that strikes you obviously is the setup of this tank. And as we discussed when we talked about its origins, it is unusual in that it has the fighting compartment at the back, so it's rear turreted, which is very unusual for a medium tank and very unusual for Soviet tanks. The Germans are the ones who more played around with that. But you can see, of course, that it gives it this decent frontal armor profile. It also has a low profile, so it's a small target front on, and it decides to hit. You can side scrape in the tank, as you can see the relative armor numbers here on the top left are red. Has some decent frontal armor. Turret is very, very strong, almost impossible to pen. But the gun depression is only 5 degrees, right? 7 degrees of elevation. So that means, you know, you can't really go hull down on this, particularly as the hull is as the turret is at the back of the tank. So that's not really an option, as you would have, for example, with the American or British tanks that have strong turret armor. So that is not a tactical option which is open to you. So therefore the question is, well, Armoured, how do I play this tank? Well, this tank, if you've played the T-34-3, the Chinese premium medium tank, then you will kind of, you know, this tank is sort of similar to that in that it has the big gun, much bigger gun, slower reload than most medium tanks, right? But if you have played that, then the tactics here are something similar, right? This tank is really about choosing your shots. It's about using the speed and mobility to get into position, choosing your shots. And it has like 50 kilometers per hour and 20 kph in reverse. So therefore it is agile and mobile. It can get around the map. It has very, very good power to weight ratio, as we saw when we looked at the mobility index, and that's the strengths of this tank. So you use that speed and agility to get out around the map, choose your shots, and make those big alpha rolls count. And that basically is the role of this tank, and you're going to see that in the gameplay, which is by Josh running his help by my bug. Monster game and a perfect execution of the strengths and how to play this tank. So I would suggest that this sort of is how you should start thinking about playing this tank, because if you try to play it as a traditional medium, because of its slow reload, etc., you're probably not going to be as successful as if you play to its strengths. So let's have a look at the gameplay. It's on Canyon, and it is a supremacy game, and as I said, it is a monster game. Now, as we go through the gameplay, what I'm going to try to do is to highlight the strengths of this tank and also its weaknesses, or not weaknesses per se, but how it's different to other mediums, because I know a lot of you watching this will be keen medium tank players and really enjoy playing that genre of tanks. But of course, this is somewhat different. As I said, very similar to the T-34-3 Chinese Premium. If you've played that and enjoyed it, you're going to love this tank. If you've played that and don't like it, for the reasons that it differs from medium tanks, for example, it's slow reload, then you're probably not going to enjoy this one so much. So, you know, that's something to bear in mind. Now, you can see here that this is perfect execution of play by Josh, going up to B, because in this map, B has to be spotted if you're in a medium light tank. So many times you're playing this map and you've got guys who don't understand their role as a medium or light tank. They don't spot B. The enemy captures B. Normally you get C or the enemy gets A, or vice versa. But then if they have B, they already have an advantage from the start, and you end up losing the game. Apart from the fact that you haven't spotted them, you don't know where they are. But he's done his job well. So what have we seen so far in the opening tactics of this game? Well, firstly, bang, we've just seen there very strong turret. The massive bounce coming off the turret there. If something hits you on the turret, it's probably 9 times out of 10 going to bounce. What else have we seen? Well, we've seen the mobility and the agility of this tank, right? It's already gone to B, now it's up in A. You can see as it's moving across, even through the water, so the soft terrain, its power to weight ratio is great, so it's mobile, agile. We've seen the pen on the gun, and we've seen those big alpha rolls. So these are the strengths. Again, we see coming in here, you know, utilizing the mobility of the tank to get into cover, and then he's going to put a nice round in here. Lower aim time on a medium tank compared to a TD gives him the shot, the kill shot there. Now we have a base captured, so now it's 1 base each. So again, utilizing the skill of this tank. Difficult shot here to try to pen the T-28 front on, but beautiful right into the hatch. For those of you who are less experienced players, if you come up to the front of a T-28 or indeed any of those AT range, very difficult to pen front on tank destroyers, there is usually a cupola or a hatch at the top that which can be penned. You need to spend a bit more time in the aiming, as Josh did there, but it can be penned, as you saw, to good effect. Switches up to APCR here to pen the VK front on, and now again utilizing mobility of the tank to go up and to spot at B again. Going to get another round here into the VK. Beautiful shot, and we can see again the mobility of the tank. To go back to its limitations again, or how it's different, because they're not so much limitations, but just how it differs again to other medium tanks. You saw there the third position, right? So you therefore need to be very aware of how you're positioning the tank. You can see here he's rolling backwards to take his shot, right? Whereas normally, if you were in this position in a medium tank, you would be front on. But everything's topsy-turvy, right? It's like the land of Rand McNally, where hamburgers eat people and people wear socks on their heads, right? So that's a Simpsons reference, by the way, for those of you who have no idea what the fuck I was talking about there. So you can see here that, you know, the positioning that he does with the tank is somewhat backwards than you would normally do with a medium tank. You would normally be front on here with your gun sticking out. He spent a lot of time in the backwards position. This also takes some training, because if you think about Blitz in terms of the skills that you acquire, a lot of it is thought, you know, and winning games comes down to thought, right? And we've discussed that many times. You see there, by the way, the lack of gun depression. We've seen that many times when we've talked about in-game decision making. But a lot of what you do is learned skills. You don't even think about it, and therefore, you know, your natural instincts when playing a medium tank are to go front on, right? Even if you don't think about it, it's your natural instincts. So therefore, you have to counter program those when you're playing to make sure that in some occasions your tank is not front on but is back on, and the turret is at the turret is facing, but your actual tank is the turret is facing the enemy, but your actual tank is facing the other way, right? You see there, beautiful use of the mobility of the tank again, getting in and out of positions, able to get away from the KV3, then put a round into him, and now it's all about mobility. Again, that power to weight ratio, a medium tank with less power to weight ratio would not have been able to get away from the KV3, would have taken a hit, lost the game. But instead, Josh is able to utilize the skills that he has, the knowledge that he has, and the power to weight ratio of that tank. And look at that, 5.3k of damage, 6 kills, pools medal, monster game. As I said, I think it's the first or second highest damage in the Hall of Fame in this tank on the North American server. And I featured a couple of Josh's games before on channel. He is an awesome player, also very cool guy, very humble guy, and always willing to share his replays so that other players can learn. And I hope that you're able to get some examples of how to play this tank to its strengths from this game. Certainly I've never had a game as good as this in it, so why wouldn't I use Josh's replay to show you exactly how to utilize this fantastic tank. Of course, it is not for everybody, as we've discussed, as we've said. It is not a tank that everybody will enjoy, but if you play to its strengths, it can be very effective and very enjoyable. So, I hope you found it useful, hope you found it enjoyable, and now I guess all that remains for me to say is, as always, pants off.